We will be jumping into the Portland market update for January 2024. I'm Will, and I create educational videos about the home buying process along with living here in the Portland metro area. Let's dive right into it. Interest rates are still a huge factor when it comes to purchasing or selling a home, so it's a good idea to take a look at what is going on. In October of 2023, we saw that interest rates had peaked around that 8%, which had really shocked the market and really withdrew a lot of the demand side. We've also seen a deepening of the lock-in effect, which basically is when sellers have such a low interest rate, it doesn't make sense for them financially to get out of that interest rate in terms of buying that next property. As of right now, we are definitely going a little bit lower. We are in the high sixes right now, and earlier on in January, we saw them in the mid to low sixes. It'll be interesting to see how this works, but just note that buyers are a lot more interest rate sensitive than sellers are. And on top of that, we are coming out of the winter months or the holiday season where we have seen a lot more days on market for a lot of these other homes. Now, in the Portland market, I've noticed that there are two different areas. One area is where if it's listed on the MLS and usually within a week or two, it's off the market. And then there's other inventory that maybe is not as attractive or needs a lot more work, things of that nature that keep it on the market for a little bit longer. Overall, we've seen days on market extend almost to the 60 to sometimes even 75 days, depending on which submarket you are in. With all this going on, we saw a huge spike in terms of the months of supply, or basically the rate of absorption when it comes to houses, go up to about 3.5 for the month of November. And then in December, we saw this actually come back down into about 2.7 months of inventory. So even though we haven't seen a lot more inventory come on the market since the fall of 2023, we still have seen a fair amount of the absorption rate or the amount of demand did decrease by quite a bit. And this is primarily given the interest rates and also the holiday season. No one knows 100% of what will actually happen with mortgage rates for 2024. However, there are three potential scenarios that may pop up and something that you will want to consider when making a home purchase or selling your house. The first scenario we could potentially see is interest rates actually rising. And this is because of inflation actually rising as well, and if it comes back to rear its ugly head again. Now, this is an unlikely situation given how we have seen a downward trend with inflation. If we do see this, it will most likely cause the Fed to have a negative reaction, which means that they will be increasing rates or keeping them at the same rate for a longer period of time. If this does happen, we will probably see a furthering of the lock-in effect where we don't see a lot of sellers transact, and that will then limit supply more. So we might see that the volume of transactions will decrease. However, the prices may not reflectively do that. The only major caveat to this is if we start to see unemployment go up significantly. And if this does happen, it will take a while for that to actually affect the housing market. The second option that might happen with rates is that we start to see rates stay about the same. They'll probably hover around the 6 or 7s, and with that probably won't be increasing to the 8%, but we would have to see some major economic changes in terms of looking at the unemployment rate or the labor market along with inflation. So with that, this is probably going to be the case for a majority of this year, maybe into the latter half of the year, depending on whether or not we have a soft landing, which is essentially not having a recession after the Federal Reserve has hiked rates so much. The third option that probably will happen eventually in either late 2024 or potentially into 2025 is that we start to see rates drop. And this is when we start to see that the Federal Reserve will start decreasing the federal funds rates. We'll see inflation come down, and we'll also see that the labor market is in a healthier place where it's not causing inflation to go up. This is something where it's really hard to predict. If we do start to see these interest rates drop, that means that we will most likely see the buyer competition come back, as long as the unemployment or basically the economy is still doing relatively well. Is now a good time to buy? And a better question to be asking is now a good time to be an owner? For a lot of people, they may not have the flexibility to get into what they want now, but also understanding that there might be stepping stones to get to where you want, and it might take a little bit longer to have yourself build up to that point. But just know that when you're looking at buying a property, you're usually going to be wanting to keep it for at least 5 to 7 years, because that's going to be the break-even point when you've gained enough equity, so that way you are able to then sell that property with additional funds for that next property. And with that, just know that this is going to be something that you're not going to be really able to time the market perfectly. It's really hard to do this, and it's very similar to day trading. And if you think about having that 5 to 7 year time frame, you're most likely not going to be able to time the perfect day to make it work. It's about finding a home that fits for you or the property that fits for you. So when it comes to these potential interest rates that are going to stay the same, we'll probably see a little bit of competition come back just due to seasonality. However, if we do start seeing these interest rates start coming down, there is a high probability that the competition is now a good time to sell. This is somewhat dependent on your situation, but if you are starting to feel the pain when it comes to moving and you would have to be contingent on the next property for selling your current property, it's actually a relatively good time. There's not a ton of competition. We're starting to see more inventory pop up, and really getting your ducks in a row when it comes to listing your property is going to be very beneficial to do that earlier on. So that way, if there's any small things that you need to get done, you have a little bit more time before we hit the busy season, which is usually anywhere between that May, April timeframe, all the way to usually about June to about middle of July. So with that, it's a good time to get everything prepped and listed, or getting everything signed and ready to go. So that way, when you do need to pull that trigger, or if you do need to find the other property, or you do find that other property, you are ready to go. If you are enjoying this video so far, it would be wonderful if you could hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out my channel a ton and allows me to help others with the home buying process. For the overall Portland market, I have seen that we are starting to heat up. A lot of the buyers are starting to come back that said that, hey, we're going to wait until rates drop. And there's just getting to a point where there's a lot of fatigue in terms of interest rates are just where they're at. And people are getting used to the fact that interest rates are what they are. And life is not going to really not stop moving for them to make this jump. So something just to kind of keep in mind, that each person's journey is a little bit different. And it's a good idea to just really assess what's going to be the best for you for the long term and plan accordingly. Also, for those who are maybe looking to buy a little bit later on, or are really wanting the perfect house when they first buy, it's a fantastic idea to understand the fact that this is just going to be a starter home. And starter homes are something that are a stepstone to getting your dream house. If you've talked to your parents or talked to anyone else who's owned a house, their first house usually is not the prettiest or the best. And it's through the time of being in the market that really matters for them to then use the equity or build the equity from their current residences to then get into those ones that are maybe a little bit fancier, a little bit nicer later down the line. So with that, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out and I'd be more than happy to help.